strangers, welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome. My name's Kayla. This is my space to talk about all things horror. Here I like to do little video essays or reviews on horror movies or books. And my goal is to build a little community so that I can hear what you have to say about it too. If that sounds like something that you might be interested in, I hope you consider subscribing. And I want to thank all of you who have subscribed already for all of the love and support. You guys have been so kind. If you would like to help out some more, please leave a like, feed the algorithm machine, or leave a comment. If you're a lurker like me and you're not really sure what to comment, how about scroll through your emoji keyboard and find me the oldest looking tech that you can find in there, because today we are talking about an early 2000s film that focused on techno horror.
Do you like to watch? Do you want to see more? I'm waiting for you. Don't you want to play with me? I'm coming for you. Do you want to play? Sorry, did I scare you?
So today we're going to talk about FeardotCom, which was directed by William Malone and came out in 2002. Little baby Kayla was somewhere around 12 or 13 years old at the time, and I remember this movie being so scary to me when I was that young. And so when I went to look it up to see where I could watch it, I was like absolutely floored that this movie's got like a 3 out of 10 or something like that on IMDb. And I knew I was going to be in for a wild ride. So I watched this movie again so that you don't have to. So the basic premise of FeardotCom finds us in a scenario of like crime drama meets horror movie, which was a very popular thing to do in the early 2000s. Back at that time, CSI was really big. Everybody wanted to be a CSI when they grew up, including me, not knowing what it actually involved. And Law and Order, of course, was really big. So all of the movies that you saw come out were like crime procedurals or crime dramas. And this was no different. It follows this guy named Mike Riley, who is a detective for the NYPD, of course, and a woman named Terry Houston, who works for the Department of Public Health, which was a little weird that she was there, but okay. So the first thing that we see is a man going down into the New York subway.
That's New York.
He's carrying some sort of like a book or something like that. They never really show what he has with him, but he sees like this really ridiculous looking ghost girl on the subway tracks, and the train is coming, and he tries to save her. So he jumps down on the tracks and gets hit by the train in this really comical way. And I mean, I guess they call in the Department of Public Health because he appears as though he's had some sort of a virus or illness. So like there's bleeding from his eyes. I can't remember what else. There's bleeding from his eyes, which is like he got hit by a train. Maybe that's why. So when Terry Houston jumps onto the scene and jump starts the like Department of Public Health's investigation into this to rule out a virus, they say that the victims had, or one of the victims anyway, had an enlarged heart, a stroke from too much adrenaline. I don't know how that works. A rupture of the blood vessels around the eyes, and a hemorrhaging around the cerebral cortex, which is like the outside part of your brain. Oh, here comes Clover. Say hi. You feeling snuggly tonight? She fucking hates me. So there's really no connection between the victims. And there's really no discernible reason why they become victims, but it's discovered that each of the victims, before they died, their computers crashed. So they start looking into their computers, I guess, their search history. They're looking into their search history. At some point, Terry remarks that the victims die of their worst fears. So, like, one of them dies in a car accident, which she's like, oh, I know him really well. He's always been really afraid of a car accident. One of them dies drowning. One of them dies from, like, cockroaches, I guess. That part of it is never really explained. Like, the part where they're killed by their biggest fears. Like, there's no meaningful connection made to the website that they're accessing. But anyways, at some point they discover that the website that they're accessing is called Feard.com. Actually, I'm sorry, it's FeardotCom.com. And it's essentially a red room where people are tortured and unalived on camera. And it's like almost like this text-based, it's almost like an old style text-based game where this woman asks questions like, do you like to watch? She's got a German accent for some reason, which is also never explained. And they type in response to her. So shortly after Mike accesses the website, naturally he is under some sort of danger. Anyway, he goes to the hospital or something, and he's like, Terry, promise me you won't access the site. So she's like, okay. And she does. And she's the one who figures it out because, like, she's, you know, she's got, like, slicked back hair and glasses. So she's the smart lady of the movie. Anyway, Mike also makes the connection between the website, the woman on the website, and some woman named Jeannie Richardson, who is not mentioned at all before this point in the movie. So we have no idea. I didn't have any idea who she was. But she is the woman on the website with the German accent who's talking to people. Terry goes to Jeannie Richardson's mother's house to ask her about her. And she shows Terry this picture of this little blonde girl in the worst wig I've ever seen. It is hilarious. It's a ghost girl that we see in the beginning of the movie. And she's got the white ball that she was bouncing in the subway station. And the mom is like, yeah, that ball, she took it everywhere with her. You couldn't get her away from it. You know, like, what? A lot of children have a comfort object or a transitional object. You know, it's usually like a blanket or a teddy bear, not a fucking inflatable ball. That's the weirdest thing. And then she says, you know, Terry is like, she like points to a picture of an abandoned steel mill. And she's like, what is the connection here? What's this? And the mom is like, oh, that's the steel mill. Jeannie loved playing there. And maybe that's why she fucking died. So Terry, I think, goes to the old steel mill, and there just happens to be this like blind woman in there sitting by a fire waiting for her. Terry, who literally is a woman who works for the Department of Public Health, understands the blind woman pointing into the water, which is a literal cesspool. Like, the literal definition of cesspool. It's just stagnant water that's been in this abandoned building for so long. Terry, Department of Public Health, jumps in to this water for some reason, goes underwater diving and finds Jeannie's corpse, and then brings it back up with her. It's very sanitary. So essentially they piece together the fact that, like, Jeannie is a ghost who is haunting the Feard.com website to take revenge on anybody who witnessed her murder or took place in her murder because they're complicit due to them being in the audience at the time. There's also this B-plot of this guy called the Doctor that Mike Riley is chasing in the beginning. And in the beginning, we see that he gets a letter from this doctor who I've just called Dr. Death. But that's not what he's called in the movie. So Mike gets this letter taunting him from the doctor. And again, no details are given to us on that investigation. Like, Did Mike find Jeannie? Did he find out about her going missing? Did he find the bodies of the other victims? Like, how does he know? What's the connection? We don't know. But anyways, we find out that Dr. Death is the one that's killing the women for this website that isn't FeardotCom.com. That's the one that was made by the ghost. She, like, you know, found the GeoCities website on her own and hired a designer, I guess. And now she's haunting people through the airwaves, the web waves, whatever you would call those. But anyway, in the end, they make it to the red room that the doctor is in the middle of unaliving somebody in, and they like unleash Jeannie's ghost on him, and she can finally get her revenge. And then Mike dies. So the reason I explained to you the plot is not because it's a good plot or because I think it's interesting or even because I think it makes sense. It's just to like give you an idea of what the movie is about. What's more interesting to me is dissecting this a little bit, starting with the fact that, so William Malone also directed House on Haunted Hill, which was a movie that came out in 1999, so about 3 years before Fear.com, and no relation to The Haunting of Hill House, which was also a movie that came out around the same time. Different plot, based on the Shirley Jackson novel, which has had many adaptations. That one was not a particular good one. But anyways, House on Haunted Hill. I found that Fear.com had a lot of the same visuals as House on Haunted Hill. Like, there was a lot of gritty looking scenery, dilapidated buildings, that I also think was pretty inspired by the movie Seven. One of my favorite movies, which came out in 1995, I believe. The villain in Fear.com also seems very inspired by Kevin Spacey's John Doe from the movie Seven, except the Dr. Death in Fear.com really doesn't have very much of a motive except like being an edgelord, whereas John Doe in the movie Seven is kind of trying to proselytize to people and teach them a lesson using the 7 deadly sins. If you haven't seen it, you really have to. It's one of the best movies. Another thing that really stood out to me was the similarities between this movie, Fear.com, and the Japanese film Cairo, or Pulse, which came out the year before in 2001. I think that similarity is probably coincidental because knowing how long that it takes to write, produce, direct, post-process a film before it can actually come out, there was probably some overlap in between the two of them. So I wouldn't say that like one is copying the other. But the difference there is that the message behind the movie Cairo, one of my favorite movies, is that there's a sense of disconnect from person to person. Like there's a disruption in interpersonal relationships because of the internet. So in Cairo, a virus is also spread through the internet, which causes people to want to unalive themselves after they view the website. So there's a lot of commentary in there about like mental health and connection and these new forms of communication and things like that, that I think is a lot deeper. I mean, it's not a perfect movie, but it's a lot deeper than Fear.com.com. I did see that Ryan Hollinger also made a video essay that looked like it must be comparing those two like techno horror films, Fear.com and Cairo. So if you're interested in a more in-depth comparison, I would check that out. I haven't watched it yet because I don't want to be influenced by someone else's opinion in what I'm saying here. But if you've watched his stuff before, he does some really in-depth video essays about horror. So check that out. So aside from this, having this nostalgic piece of it for me as someone who grew up in like the late 90s and early 2000s, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I felt like the message is in this movie, for better or for worse, because I don't think it's a good one. And I don't think it was an intentional one either. I think it was just kind of like a message that came about because of this horrible plot that felt very slapped together. So before I go too far into that, I just wanted to define a couple of things for you. The first one being an urban legend. So an urban legend from the Encyclopedia Britannica is a folklore or a story about an unusual or humorous event that many people believe to be true, but that is not true. So I guess if you go by that definition, like most things you hear on social media are urban legends. So this goes on to say, they occur in cultures worldwide, featuring common plots and themes with minor differences reflecting local knowledge and cultural mores. Although many urban legends are told for their shock value or humor, folklorists believe that urban legends reflect the anxieties and beliefs in modern society, such as fears related to technology or crime. Thus, they hold as important a place in the study and collection of folklore as older traditional tales. So, folklore, or if we're going even further back into fairy tales, used to be ways that like the elders of a community or culture could pass things down, life lessons, rules, social mores, values, to the next generation, right? So even, take Cinderella, for example, as a fairy tale, right? One of the messages that's passed along in that story is that someone with a very evil heart is ugly on the outside, like Cinderella's stepsisters. But Cinderella, who has a very kind heart and treats everyone from the smallest mouse to the biggest human, I guess, with a kind heart, is very beautiful. And she wins in the end by winning over the prince, right? So the moral of that story is always be kind, always persevere. And that if you are a bad person, you will get your comeuppance in the end. Folklore, similarly, in the United States, we have very rich folklore from the Native American people to for some reason, when I think folklore, I always think of Appalachia. There are a lot of good stories that come out of the South and out of Appalachia that have to do with moralizing, essentially, and not necessarily in a bad way, but just, to teach people. Urban legends, I find, yes, some of them are funny, but urban legends I find tend to be kind of frightening. And the goal is kind of fear mongering in order to either warn somebody about something or to tell them to do or not to do something. So if you've ever seen the horror movie Urban Legends, which is another really good early 2000s movie, they really delve into the more popular urban legends because that's how the killer kills people. So one of the ones that's featured on that I wanted to bring up because it has to do with people's fear and anxiety around technology is, now I'm going to very briefly, very, very briefly just mention animal cruelty. So skip 20 seconds ahead if you don't want to hear this. But the story of the dog in the microwave. So the urban legend surrounding that came about, I believe, when microwave technology was new. Most people didn't have a microwave oven in their homes. People didn't really know how to use them or what they were for or what they did. How did they heat up food? They weren't really sure. So this particular urban legend goes that an old woman brings her dog in from the rain and thinking she has this new microwave technology that can dry the dog off. She puts the dog in the microwave and kaboom. It doesn't really go well for anybody. And that is very much about the fear of this new technology and how it could potentially be dangerous. So this movie, FeardotCom, moralizes around the internet and around the early 2000s, for those of you youngins who either were too little or not alive yet to witness it, the internet was really in her Wild West era still. So, not only did it take you 20 minutes to download a web page on dial-up internet, but it was really easy to come across things that were unsavory, let's say, that are much harder to access or find nowadays. Not impossible, obviously. People are still traumatizing themselves, but it was much harder back in the day. I mean, I remember in 2003, so the year after this movie came out, my family got cable or DSL internet, and the idea that I could leave the internet on was mind-blowing. Before that, with dial-up internet, you had to make sure no one was on the phone. You could only use it for a short period of time to not interrupt anything. And I think you had to pay by the minute. So it was we never really used the internet a ton when I was growing up. So once we transitioned over to cable internet where we could leave it on all the time, it was a game changer, really. Nothing was off limits. So the other definition that I want to give to you is a red room, which is what you've heard me mention a few times already in this video. And you're like, what the fuck is a red room? I don't know what that is. I'm not as chronically online as this woman is. So a red room, from rationalwiki.org. Never heard of that before. This is a new one for me. But anyways, Red Room is a composite urban legend. It is allegedly a hidden website or service on the dark web where you can see and or participate in an interactive torture or unaliving of another person. It is essentially the snuff film legend retold for the YouTube era. It is similar to other moral panics involving the so-called dark web in that it was made popular by uncritical reports provided by both traditional and social media. So this is an example of people not understanding this technology, right? So we know that seedy things happen on the internet. Like, we've had proof of that. And by seedy things, I mean, like, there's probably human trafficking, weapon sales, the sales of, am I allowed to say drugs in a YouTube video? They're going to smack me in the face with something. So we know that things like that have existed. We also know that snuff films, unfortunately, are a real thing. If you don't know what that is, don't look it up. It's illegal material. And anyways, even if you don't get caught, you will ruin your life by giving yourself PTSD. Not that I know, because I'm not dumb enough to look stuff like that up. But just know that it involves essentially what a red room is supposed to be, but it's like on a VHS tape, if you will, a DVD, a USB drive. I don't know. Early 2000s. Internet's in her Wild West era. People are like, oh my God, anything can happen on the internet. There's probably people getting unalived for hundreds of thousands of people. People are paying for that material. And that's what's coming up in this movie. That's the topic of this movie, is this just fear of what exists in this website. Some of the things that I noted they were moralizing about in this movie include the following: overusing the internet, goths, punks, or alternative lifestyles, casual sex, reality TV, women being quote unquote dumb about stranger danger. So one of the victims gets abducted by Dr. Death, and she's just I think selling tickets at a movie theater or something like that. And he comes up to her and he's videotaping her. He's recording her in a time where that was not a normal thing to do, right? Because you'd be walking around with a handheld camera, not your phone. Now everybody records everything all the time. Back then that was not a normal thing. And she doesn't question that. And he just walks up to her and he's like, you could be a model. And she's like, for real? And she goes with him. She agrees to go with him to his studio or something like that so he could photograph her. I don't know. And, women are always being blamed for being dumb and getting themselves into those situations. So they're moralizing against that. How dare she not know that she was going to get abducted? She should have known that. Drinking excessively, and finally, being German. We all know you shouldn't be German. This movie has also been compared to Ringu, which came out, I believe, in 1999. And as we all know, because if you haven't seen the original Japanese movie, I'm sure you've seen the American remake. But that has to do with the propagation or the perpetuation of a curse through technology. So in that case, a VHS tape, and the tape was a series of disturbing images that were strung together that end up cursing somebody. And after you watch the video, you get a phone call from a ghost that says 7 days. You have 7 days to live. In this film, you have 48 hours. Nobody calls you, though. I don't think. You just have 48 hours and then you die, because that is the amount of time that it took for Jeannie to pass away after she was abducted into this red room. Okay, so I really did not understand the plot of this movie. So when I don't understand something, I have ADHD. So sometimes when I watch a movie or a show or something like that, I have a lapse in attention and I miss a crucial part of the plot. I have a hard time remembering character names, things like that. So sometimes if I'm going to be, putting together some sort of opinion post watching it, I will do a mind map. As I've done here, I've tried to make it look like one of those, what this is referencing. I don't have to tell you. But this was the best I could come up with. So we've got FeardotCom.com, which was created by Jeannie Richardson, who was murdered by Dr. Death. Apparently her ghost created the website to get revenge on those who watch. And as a child, she enjoyed playing in steel mills. I guess she was Dr. Death's first kill, but we never get a confirmation on that or like why he loved her so much. There's really no background given on the connection between the two of them other than the fact that I guess he unalived her. So we've got Dr. Death. He murders women for views on his red room, but it's not FeardotCom.com. He's taunting Mike Riley, who apparently has an investigation onto him, and he is an edgelord. He said, death should be so repulsive that we don't grow fond of it. And so Mike Riley pulls a gun on him, and another one of his quotes are, guns are so impersonable and artless. You have to get up close and personal with a knife, I guess. I don't know. And then he kills Mike with a gun. So I guess that goes out the window. Mike Riley is a detective investigating Dr. Death and mysterious, apparently to him in the beginning, unrelated deaths that we never hear about, and, resident tough guy. So we don't know how that investigation became connected. Dr. Death himself is not associated with FeardotCom.com. So I have in my purple Post-it a whole bunch of plot holes or unanswered questions, such as what is the killer's, why, what is the killer's motive? Whenever you have a villain, when you write a villain, one of the most important pieces of the villain is motive. Why are they doing what they do? What drives them? What is their goal? Because an antagonist, just like a protagonist, has to be driven towards something. And it's usually the opposite thing from the protagonist, right? What is the connection to the steel mill other than Jeannie liked playing in the steel mill when she was a child because her mother was irresponsible, her parents were irresponsible? Is this where the murders take place? We don't know. What the fuck is up with the blind woman? Why is she there? What does she have to do with anything? Why is there a blind woman? So Alistair is the actual name of Dr. Death. We don't know what the site he uses for the Red Room is called. And there's no mention of how Riley discovered the other victims of Dr. Death, as I already said. As you can see, this really doesn't make much sense. So to end this video, I'm going to leave you with this little factoid from the Fear.com Wikipedia page. Producer Moshe Diamant originally hired Josephine Coyle to write a screenplay revolving around a woman who uses her sexuality and the internet to lure victims, and was originally an erotic horror film intended for Zalman King, who specialized in erotic films. Sounds almost like the plot of The Girl in 6E. If you've never read it, it's a decent book. Give it a check it out. As Coyle did research, she came across the idea that energy cannot be created or destroyed, and thought the idea of the internet being used as a conduit for the energy of a murdered woman seeking revenge on her killer was an interest route to take the concept. That does sound really interesting, and like I said, it's really similar to the plot of Pulse or Cairo. So Malone, the director, William Malone, liked Coyle's script and credited her for the initial hook, but Malone performed some uncredited rewrites, particularly regarding the ending as well as the inclusion of hallucination sequences. So, moral of this urban legend, it's not an urban legend, Kayla. Moral of the story here is, can you just let women can you just let them write things? Can you just let them have ideas, please? Because we probably would have come out with a halfway decent movie if this guy didn't rewrite this woman's entire script. So that is all. If you want to check out Fear.com, I don't recommend it. It's a really terrible movie, but it's on Pluto for free. Their website is dog shit. Their app is also dog shit. So it was really hard to actually even watch this movie. But anyways, if you've seen it, what do you think? Do you like techno horror? Do you like techno thrillers? This is one of my favorite genres because I think this concept of exploring the internet as a place that could harbor these scary things, these haunted things, maybe as a millennial, it particularly appeals to me. I don't know, but let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for listening to me ramble through this. Bye.